there were people there joining from Tokyo and Australia and Saudi Arabia and India and Ohio, and so you never know know what time it is where people are in the world. But for me, it's 8 o'clock Eastern, so let's get started. So first, a little bit before we bring up Don, just a little bit about the Shindig platform because it may be unique to you. So Shindig is a very unique platform that allows for collaborative groups during this presentation. And what the whole thing behind EdChat Interactive is, we want to replace talking head webinars with actual deep engaged learning events. And so what Shindig allows us to do is that. And you may have seen from some of the abilities that you have when you enter the room that you have some things that you may not be used to, some new features that you may not be used to, if you're coming from, say, like a WebEx or another kind of platform. One of the first things you can do is, if you see at the bottom of your screen, you can see all the images of all the other participants who are in the webinar. And as folks come in, you will see their little icon show up. And if you click on someone's icon, you can actually group together, and that will allow you to form a small group. And throughout the session today, Don is going to ask you to form a small group, talk about something that he's spoken about. Maybe it's a question that he poses to you, or maybe it's something he wants you to reflect upon. And instead of doing that in isolation, we encourage you to join up and join a group. Now, don't be shy. We're all here as learners. We're all here as equals, and so don't be afraid to just click on someone's random picture and jump into a conversation. You can have up to 4 people in a group, and that allows us as the 5th person to kind of come around and bounce around. So Mitch, who you just heard from a second ago, will be able to come around. I'll be able to come around, and Don will be able to float in and out of those groups to hear what folks are saying. Now, you also have some other if you hover over your avatar, you can see things like raising your hand. So again, these are very interactive events, and so after you have the opportunity to work in a small group, we'll be able to actually bring you up on stage. And I think Don has some special guests that he's going to have to bring up on stage. But raising your hand is the indication to Mitch and I here in the background that you'd like to speak and come up on stage. And again, don't be shy. This is a great opportunity to share what you've learned or what you've heard or what you've reflected on. So by raising your hand, that lets us know that you want to be brought on stage. You've also got a questions button, and that's a place for you to type questions. Now, Don doesn't see those questions. We see them in the background. And if it's something urgent, you can drop a question in there. And then if it's something you want to ask Don, you can put that in there, and we'll collect those and we'll try to answer those as we go. You've also got some other features there, like adjusting your audio and video and things like that. But why don't you take just a second, and I'll give you about 90 seconds, and go ahead and just click on somebody else's image, group up, and introduce yourself. Tell that person where you're from, and we're most excited about to hear from Don. To kind of group up and see, and we'll have plenty more opportunities as we go through today to experiment with that. Now, you may have seen me. I actually joined as a professional, so that just allows me to keep tabs on things. So you may see my avatar pop up and look at it sideways because of the other computers over here. But that aside, let's not waste any more time on outside of hearing what Don has to say. So first, a little bit about Don Wettrick. Don Wettrick has one of the coolest titles of educators that I've heard of in a long time. He's the innovation specialist at Noblesville High School, which is just outside Indianapolis, and he's the author of a really cool book called Pure Genius: Building a Culture of Innovation and Taking 20% Time to the Next Level, which I've had the chance to hear a little bit about, and sounds like tech. I'm sure that Don will talk a little bit about that. He's worked as a middle school and high school teacher, educational and innovation consultant, and an education speaker. He travels all across the U.S. and Europe talking about collaboration, social media, work environments, and how innovation can be fostered in the classroom. So I'm really excited about this conversation because I know this is something that a lot of people are pretty passionate about today. So without further ado, let's hear from Don about Genius Hour and social media and how that can cause innovation in class.
First of all, if I sound congested, sorry, it's cold and flu season, and it's right now -3 degrees in central Indiana. I'm glad you guys can join us. We're supposed to have around 40 tonight. And more importantly, I've had a lot of people email and feedback to me that if I could get a student or two to give some feedback. I see one on here right now, and I think I have another two coming. But a lot of people wanted some Q&A time with some of my students, and I think that that's also important because anything can sound good on paper. Anybody can say that they're doing innovative things in the school, and I think it's important you hear from the students themselves, because other than that, you don't really know if it's legitimate or not. So let me start. Go ahead, Steve, with the second slide. Essentially, yeah, as we said before, my name is Don Wettrick, and several years ago, oops, go back there. I have to start off with one. I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek, but people don't buy what you have; they buy why you have it. And so my journey goes back to why I want to do this and begin with. And the first thing is that I think a lot of times school gets in the way of great learning. Sometimes our students want to engage in things or learn things, and they just don't have the time. And I think that there's not that many alternatives for these students, especially the creatively entrepreneurial. And luckily, we have Zach on here, and he's going to tell you about his app that he's brought to market, and you can download. But it's also kind of a students don't have to be at school to learn anymore. But I think that they should be. I think online learning is great, but nothing beats the one-on-one interaction or a group interaction. And matter of fact, we were just out at Facebook headquarters and Google and some of these other Silicon Valley places, and they even found it kind of ironic that in a day and age where a lot of tech companies are allowing you to telecommute and everything else, a lot of companies find so much value in working together in person. So while it's true a lot of students can do learning at home online, it's really great when they have a space and a time to get together and things. So that was also kind of a driving force. And then lastly, yeah, I put down there the Ferris Bueller theory. I'm a big fan of that movie, and in that movie, Ferris has to skip school to learn and have the most educational day of his life. So I didn't want that to occur in my room. Go ahead, next slide. The other thing I got inspired by is that I'm sure, like a lot of you guys, you'd seen Daniel Pink's TED Talk. If you have not, you really need to. Like tonight, need to. But after watching that TED Talk, I really wanted to start a class around there. And after a couple months, I convinced my then principal at another school I was at to have this kind of class where I could allow them to, like, Dan was talking about that freedom and mastery and purpose, that students could start working on the things that they always wanted to work on. And from there, I just kind of opened up my eyes. I started finding some people on Twitter and things like that. The chief among them, Tony Wagner at Harvard, was writing a lot about student innovators. And then my one of my personal heroes, Tina Seelig at Stanford University. I highly recommend you find some of her work. Check her out. Actually, my students were watching a talk that she had given at Stanford just today. And then even some sources like the guys at Freakonomics, when you start thinking critically about things. So these are the things that I was inspired by that I wanted to bring to the class. But what is the class? Next slide. What the heck is going on with this type of class? Oh, I'm sorry. It was all. There's a nice picture. It was also inspired by 1989 me. Little background. When I was in high school, we didn't have labels yet called ADD, but I'm sure I had it because I would get bored easy, and I love learning. And to this very day, I love learning about different things everywhere. And I always remember when I asked to do a project in English class. This was in 1989. I asked, instead of doing a poster board, I could do a video, and the teacher said, "Sure, yeah." And I'll always remember it because I put my heart and soul to it. I mean, this is in the early VHS days, so I thought it was a pretty big deal. And when I did this, I got it. I got a post-it note on the VHS cassette the day later. It just said A, and I've never empty about an A in all my life. And the reason why was it was an audience of one. I got to collaborate with a friend, which I thought was cool, but then the end result was just a grade. There was nothing else. Well, now we live in a day and time where, my gosh, students can connect with anybody all over the world, and I think that it's important that you do that. So that was the other thing I was really inspired by. All right, go ahead, Steve. Next slide. So a lot of people are interested in Genius Hour, and we're definitely going to talk about Genius Hour 20% time. But essentially, what I've done our class based on kind of the 20% time model, except we do it 100% time. So before I start taking questions about Genius Hour, I'm going to briefly go over what we do. Our innovations class it's just a lot like Genius Hour. It's passion based, project based. We learn by doing. We don't like to get into hypotheticals. Just today, we were discussing the difference between creativity and innovation and entrepreneurship. A lot of people can be creative and use your imagination, but when you start coming up with solutions and things that haven't really been used before, that's innovation. And that's what we look for. We look for opportunities everywhere. We look around to see things that need to be improved. Anything you want to know more about, that's kind of what the class is designed to set out to do. I have a minimum and a maximum point allotted to it, but it's really not about the grade. I try to get that culture shift where some of my traditional A students don't really have to worry about the grade. But at the same time, there still has to be a dangling carrot out there and there has to be some accountability. And even within the last couple of weeks, we've even changed around some of our structure based on the feedback that I got back from my students just a couple of weeks ago before Christmas. They still are really active on how the class runs. Next slide. The other thing that the students must do is we always start off with a pitch day. They have a driving question. They're telling me what they're interested in. The other thing that makes the state of Indiana happy, at least, is that in their process and in their drive to learn these things, they submit a proposal to me, and they also have which standards they think they're going to be covering. And then from there, you're also supposed to find a collaborator. I think this is one thing I think all Genius Hours need to do is you need to find outside experts um, because, and it shouldn't be your dad or your dad's buddy. By having your students look for outside experts and collaborators, that's so much learning comes out of that, and quite frankly, great networking potential for them later as well. Then the students start carrying it out. They blog every week. They make presentations. We try to be very, very visible online. We're transparent in everything we do. We maintain a YouTube channel. They blog every other week. Um, and essentially, I mean, there's a ton of things to go over if you have questions, but that is the very basic sketch of what we do. Go ahead, next slide, Steve. Um, and a lot of times people ask me about the nuts and bolts, and please understand, on a 20% time, you may be using your time for just Fridays or just Wednesdays. So when you look at this, this is what had worked for us. But basically, the first part of the week, we do have a brainstorming session. We have a creativity lesson a lot of times at the beginning of the year. You also bring in other sources of inspiration. We like watching TED Talks. You might find something in Fast Company magazine you want to bring in. And then the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday kind of thing, a lot of times they work on their driving questions. They're collaborating, they're Skyping with other collaborators. A lot of times they can leave the building and work with people. In fact, there is a new tech startup close to us in Carmel, Indiana, and a couple of our students are going and visiting there. And then every other Friday, they're required to blog, and I can't tell you how important that is, and not just blogging for blogging's sake, but teachers are celebrities, right? We know somebody that knows somebody, and a lot of times I'll encourage some of people in my PLN. I'm like, hey, look at what my student Zach is doing, or hey, look at what my student Dave is doing, and so on and so forth. And then a lot of times they'll get really great feedback. Ironically enough, Zach's with us today, and Gold at Stanford asked me late this summer, "Hey, what student is really owning this digital learning thing?" And so just a couple of days ago, he did a really cool article on Zach Baker, who will be talking here in a little bit because I'm excited that he's on, and he has to go pick up his sister in about 20 minutes, so I'll make room for him here soon. Go ahead, next slide. Okay, so that's really, really brief. And normally I give this time about an hour to go over all these things. So I was rapid pace, but they wanted me to wrap this up in between 45 an hour. So get into some groups and Zach's there in the middle. And honestly, I'll bring him on stage once we're done talking for a little bit. But number one, do you already have a Genius Hour 20% time at your school? If so, what are the pitfalls? And honestly, that's what I really want to talk about tonight. If you want to, is what isn't working. I also want to know the successes, and I want to know what's great about it. But I hear from probably more teachers on what it's not, and I want to possibly get together and brainstorm what it can be. And then again, having here briefly, he might also provide some great insight on what students think and what they are doing and what they're not. And then lastly, if you don't have a Genius Hour or a 20% time, what's holding you back? Is it administration buy-in? And if it is, let me help. I'm fairly convincing. Is it parents' opinions? Is it just simply not enough time? You think you're constantly having to teach the test all the time anyway? What are some of the issues you have on why you can't have this sort of setup? And especially, I want to also really, really hear from the elementary people too, because I think Genius Hour 20% time is so essential at the elementary school level, especially if we can get those people started. So, Steve, you said you wanted to start the clock. You guys can go ahead and form into groups. Steve, if they have any questions, will you be there to answer them and how they do that? So we had some people just filter in.
To to it always irks me to bring somebody down and when they're in the sentence, but I don't want to take the questions away. I want to leave those up. So yeah, so the what Don's asking you to do is kind of talk about those questions that you see now. And one thing that I failed to mention is you can make those questions a little larger. So if you actually you hover over the image where the questions are, you'll get a little enlarge button and you'll be able to see them full screen. You won't be able to see the other participants in the room, but you will be able to see a larger view of those slides. So for the next 7 to 10 minutes or so, Don wants you to kind of group up. Remember, groups, you can have groups of up to 4. Just click on somebody else's image, and your images will join together, and you'll be able to talk to each other as long as your mics are, you did the mic check and whatnot. You'll be able to talk to each other, see each other, and you'll be able to have a conversation in a small group. And then after about 8 to 10 minutes or so, I'll bring Don back up, and we can bring folks up on the stage to talk about what you talked about.
Um, Now, I guess I can't necessarily you guys all at the same time, correct? Correct. I tell you what, can we bring Zach up to stage? Zach, I tell you what, because we can't really hear each other live at the same time, I'd like for you to address people. Um, Number one, tell the people here what a Genius Hour type time isn't, and number two, give a student's perspective on what this is to you and what this is to a lot of students. Can you bring Zach up to stage?
So the whole Genius Hour, it's basically it's a time to be incredibly creative and collaborative with your peers. I feel like more classes are sort of going to this, but it's incredible in innovations class how collaborative we are with everybody. You peers have, and you just like put all of that talent and like emotion and everything towards these really really cool projects. I think everybody has a project that they're passionate about, or like 90% of them do, and it's really cool to help each other and like see how that all moves forward. In terms of like how the day goes, sort of like time wise, usually Mr. Wettrick will sort of update us on like what's going on for the first 10 or so minutes, um, uh, and then maybe we'll watch some videos, or and some kids will announce what they've been up to and this week, and then after that, everybody just gets to work, doing whatever they need to do, calling people, working on their projects, collaborating. We'll do a wrap up. So it's like, okay, what did you achieve today? and this sort of to hold everybody accountable what they're doing to make sure nobody's really flying under the under the radar.
Okay, well, Zach is also being modest. I'm gonna bring you back up here in a second and tell them about your podcast. Uh, Zach has been working feverishly with another student who graduated last year, and their podcast is extraordinarily good. He's been talking about all the, how you can own your high school experience. But the other thing I like about what Zach's doing, and some of my or more successful students in this class is this is a time for us to do the things that you always wanted to, but you couldn't. Case in point, last year, a story that we did that went viral. We had a student that was 500 pounds and suicidal, and it just worked out to where we used the class time to work with the student, and the story went viral. But more importantly than the student, the story going viral was that class allowed time to work with this particular student and end up starting a movement. We ended up starting an all school campaign. I've heard some other people that in their genius hour time that like I should have asked Andy McNair to be here. I've worked quite a bit with her at the elementary level. The elementary school kids were working on a genius hour project that they heard that their shelter, animal shelter in their town was a kill shelter, and so the students got to research it and got to convince their shelter that if they would help in finding responsible owners, that they would change their policies, and they end up raising food, and they end up getting uh, uh, change. They also had a day where their genius hour was dedicated towards finding outside experts, and in their town they had Bluebell ice cream, so they had a driving question of how do you create flavors of ice cream? And these experts from Bluebell came in, and they ended up making some really great projects out of that. And I think that's the genius of a genius hour is that um, you don't know where inspiration is going to come from, but it's student driven, and it's that time, it's that sacred time where a student that would really want to work on these kind of projects and want to do these things, do we have the time for them to be innovative? Zach was just telling us about he didn't know about which students had what talents. Well, when all of a sudden you're in a pitch day and you're in the same room and the students are volunteering to pick up this piece of your project or that, all of a sudden this collaboration just happens. Um, but the thing that scares me is that there's a lot of teachers that I hear back from. Matter of fact, it was episode 6 that I did on our YouTube channel. Hey, I'm doing this genius hour thing and nothing worked. I told kids get innovative, and they didn't do well. I went to grading my first. I thought it was a really great time for me to grade. And that's the thing that's scaring me about the movement. There's a lot of groundswell and a lot of buzzword about the term innovation and things like that. But unless it's a concerted effort and it's planned out and it's there's still a dangling carrot, this movement has a real potential to go nowhere. And the naysayers that say, well, genius hour is just a time for nothing to happen, they'll be right if it's not structured correctly. Zach, I know that actually it's almost time for you to go. Tell the teachers here. Number one, tell them a little bit about your podcast. But then number two, tell them also about the app you created before you have to go.
Everybody. Okay, so one of the big innovation projects I'm working on in the last couple of weeks, actually longer than that, is a podcast called Edupreneurship. Um, so it's basically how to take advantage of your high school experience. And I'm working with a fresh and week podcast, which comes out with an episode once a week. We're now on episode 15, I think, and we are soon to be interviewing some really big names in education in Indiana and all over the world. So we're really excited about that. But the podcast is getting bigger and bigger every time we release an episode. We're getting we just broke 550 downloads, which is awesome. And we're incredibly excited to see about where it's going. And we love getting feedback from people about like who's listening to the podcast, because we don't really know at this point whether it's teachers, students, administrators, or a collection of all three. But I encourage you to check it out. If you check out Don's Twitter or my Twitter after this chat, we can probably put up a link to it. But we've been working really hard on it, and so we're pretty excited about it. In addition to that, the other big project that I've been working on is an app called PassWiz. So it allows students, teachers, and administrators to have digital hall passes for all their students. Because our school, every student has an iPad, so it allows us to get rid of those annoying paper hall passes that teachers have to sign and students lose. And it's all cloud connected over the web, and teachers and students love it. It just got released this week to 3,000 kids, and everybody's liking it. So we're really excited to see where that's going to go in the future. Hopefully, incorporate some more schools using it, and those are free to download and check out on the App Store too. So those are like sort of the projects we've been working on this year in innovations.
Well, thanks so much, Zach. Definitely, and I know you got to go, Zach. Thank you for joining us. And absolutely, make sure you tweet that out and hashtag it Edchat Interactive, and then the people on here will definitely check that out. Zach, his app that he developed is now being used for our entire school. It already, of course, it just got released 2 days ago, and of course, it had several little small fires to put out, like any app would. And the kid's been diligent about getting to it. And actually, I think this app is getting picked up by a lot of schools. With that said, we were also really flattered. We were making some presentations, and a local, very reputable law firm in Indianapolis has heard what we're doing, and we've been lucky enough that they're giving us free patent pro bono work up to, and this first one, another one is working on something right now. It's being patented, and I literally can't talk about it. But we're getting free pro bono patent work, and Zach, the student you just heard from, make good friends with him, because that's one of those students that you know is going to go places. All right, I should. Can we open it up to questions, or if not, I can go ahead with some other slides. But if you guys would like to type in some questions, I would love to go over some of your concerns about Genius Hour or the movement. You guys want to go ahead and type questions? Thumbs up.
I'm getting Mitch to pull the slides down. I can't pull them down since he put them up, but I'm getting Mitch to pull the slides down so that I can have you and a participant up at the same time. So there are actually a couple folks who have questions in the background, and I will, if they want to come up, go ahead and raise your hands, and I can pull you up and you can ask your question. But I know Martin has a very pertinent question. What is his Twitter handle? And then what was the name of his blog? And Don, I will go ahead and bring you back up as well so that we can get you back up here. Here we go.
Zach Baker can be found at Zach A. Baker on Twitter, ZACKABAKER. If you do a Twitter search on him, like I said, Dr. Howard Reingold at Stanford just did a really nice piece on him on digital learning and things that he's up to. His Edgepreneurship podcast is available, and again, that up, we'll tweet that. But also, if you can, Zach, hashtag that Edchat Interactive. He's giving me a thumbs up, like he'll do it. You'll definitely want to check that out. The other thing is I highly encourage you, not just because we like the views, but our YouTube channel. Actually, I think it was Sherry Crowfoot once that said, if I could be a fly on the wall in your class. And that's when we thought, wait a second, we should be videotaping a lot more. Our YouTube channel, we update about every week. A lot of times you'll hear from students themselves. The first 4 weeks or so, I'm giving a lot of, oh shoot, I'm not plugged in. My computer's about to go dead. Let me but yeah, the YouTube channel is NHS Innovations. I thought my chargers were here. Anyway, go ahead and start asking or type in your questions while I get my power converter.
No problem. No problem. We don't want your computer to die, so take the time that you need. So just a reminder, while Don steps away for just a second, Don's doing another session of Edchat Interactive, and you can visit the edchatinteractive.org website and see that he's doing another session on the 21st of January, and that where he'll continue some, because I know we're coming up on time here in just about 15 minutes or so, and so you'll want to be sure to check out that next session that Don's going to be
Sorry
doing.
about that.
All
Okay.
right. So speaking of Sherry, so you mentioned Sherry. So she actually asked the question, how is your heavy student doing from last year? Or how is she doing? How is that person doing this year?
Yeah, I still am in a lot of contact with him. He's almost turned into a little mini celebrity. After the story ran, especially the Today Show online thing for it, and he started. Actually, he was getting TV offers. It was strange, but he's kind of gone on, done his own thing. He gets fan mail from a lot of students all over the country, and like a lot of students that struggle with weight, he's been kind of up and down. And he's still, one of the reasons why he suffered from depression, he lost his father. So he, it's been a steady climb, but he's doing pretty good. Circling back to the Genius Hour, I think that was one of the reasons why I fell in love with the class. That was really early on in our Genius Hour class. And I thought how great it was to have a specific period of time where you can quite literally impact students' lives. And even this year, two of our girls, if you want to read their blogs, we'll have this available. They're working on a self-esteem campaign for middle school girls. They've noticed that there's a lot of female students in middle school that they don't have the best of relationships with their dads. And so that's kind of what they focused on. And they're working on real character building things, and not to succumb to some of the media messages of what girls should be like and act like and things like that. So there's a misconception that all Genius Hour projects have to be tech heavy. They don't have to be. Like I was saying, and there are some elementary school students that were learning how to create different ice cream flavors, and I've heard from students that were starting their own 5K races and charity things and this and that. It's just this hub of activity. That's also why we've taken this field trip 2 years in a row. But when we go out to Stanford and Silicon Valley, their work environment is what we try to recapture. There's a lot of cross pollination. There's a lot of students. There's a lot of design area working with people that are coders, so on and so forth, and they kind of all collaborate and work together. And that's what we try to capture. Other questions?
Margit, so there's another question. To what extent are students confined to certain requirements?
Well, they tell me what they are working on. They'll write a proposal to me. If it's just a bad proposal, I can shoot it down. And a lot of times I'll give them time to prove me wrong. Like say, for example, one of our big things that you have to find is you have to find a great. Well, you might get and says, I'm going to work with Manning. No, you're not. I'll give you 48 hours to do it, but I don't want you wasting too much time finding that A-list collaborator. And at the same time, we also give time for failure too. So if you said, hey, I'm going to work on, like we had a science project that has been done by a lot of people, and everybody says it can't be done, but this kid was sure it was going to work for him. So I gave him a couple days to try it, and of course it didn't work, but he loved it. So he didn't really fail those 2 weeks. He just learned what not to do. And again, that's in the next 4 hours talking about culture building and how, to set up a Genius Hour type class or a project, you really have to embrace the whole failure thing. Your product may not look the way you intended it at the end. The things that you set out to study might not be the things you study at the end. and that's okay. Matter of fact, if you guys are ever interested, I wrote a book, Pure Genius, building a culture of collaboration. Ironically enough, Sherry Crowfoot put a gun to my head and made me write it, and she's here tonight. Hi, Sherry. But it's so important pieces there in an environment. I'm a big fan of Kung Fu Panda, and when Master Oogway was talking, he was telling him that Poe was going to be the chosen one, and he was saying, "You can't be serious." And the metaphor of the garden is something I love. You don't when you plant a seed, it's going to turn out to be that tree, but the most important thing is having that fertile environment, having the atmosphere where learning is going to occur no matter what. And so I'm less about demandments and constrictions, and more about fostering what they want to do.
I'm going to drop off because I know I see Tom Whitby has a question. I'm going to let him come on up and ask his question and interact a little bit.
Hey, Tom. Not sure if I heard Tom. Yeah.
Tom's having that. Yeah, he looks like he's only had last time about. I couldn't quite hear him there. So what we'll do is I'll bring your slides back up, and if you wanna, we've got about
Yeah.
7-10 more minutes. We'll
Okay.
go from there.
Yeah, the next slides are some of the things, and really one of the things that I've really enjoyed is looking at people like Kevin Brookhouse last one time was showcasing what they did. So on this next slide that I want to go over, I'm going to start talking about next one. Talking about if you're getting started, some of the first things that we have to overcome in a Genius Hour is both as a class and on your own. First of all, as a class, the first thing to do, as I have in their very small type, is start small. I can't emphasize this enough. A lot of the first mistake people make on a Genius Hour type project is they try to shoot for the moon, when in reality they should just get off the ground. Matter of fact, we even do a thing called a feasibility study. Say that your students want to change something within the school. Can you even legally do that? Feasibility studies are a huge time saver. A student says, "Hey, I want to do an all-school canned food drive." Are you allowed to? I want to start a all-school coffee shop. Can you? So doing a feasibility study is often important. Doing some data analysis, talking to the experts, end users. What a lot of our students think is a really cool idea might not be a cool idea once they start talking to people. Um, and I think that's the great learning tool about this as well. They may think that they're really onto something, and when they start talking to more people and they prototype and they start to try to get their things out there, the audience will tell them your product is, I don't like it, and then they have to adapt. And I think that's the best thing possible. Right now, one of my students is designing an app for his place of business. I can't talk about where it is because negotiations, but he was just so mad because they kept shooting down his app idea. And the student eventually figured it out. It's the guy, basically, the guy above him didn't like it that the idea was coming from an 18-year-old. Actually, he's 17. And then he figured out that he needs to bring his superior on with him and make him look better. And lo and behold, once he started doing that, then the guy loved the idea, because then his boss said, "You guys are doing a great job." It was great, and so he learned how to take criticism. Also, as a class, when we start small, something that I got the Freakonomics guys, we do, and please use this. We always do a pre-mortem. Now, a post-mortem is when, of course, you do an autopsy and they said, "Hey, this guy drank himself to death and he has cirrhosis liver." A pre-mortem is when you ask the students, "How is your project going to fail?" And they can tell you ahead of time. They'll say, "Well," and so a lot of times I'll do post-it notes. I'm a big fan of D school style. But a pre-mortem is, "Hey, before you even start this project, tell me all the reasons why it can fail. Tell me all the roadblocks ahead of you." And by them thinking of what might be a roadblock, they can find ways around the roadblock. It's so obvious, but I never did it before until I read about that. I also like to teach my students how to, I put in there how to fight, but we learn how to argue. We learn how to debate things out because when we have pitch days, they'll tell us, hey, I'm going to work on this project. And some of our students will say, well, that's a bad idea. And here's why. And that took a few weeks for us to get used to that. But it's also a huge time saver. And sometimes in the midst of them defending it and saying, no, it's not a bad idea, it's a really the students can strengthen their own learning by hearing their critics. So instead of, we're never personal, we never make personal attacks, but teaching your students and having this Genius Hour time to be transparent with one another, learn how to talk things out, I think is all a part of the great thing. Simply saying, hey, we're going to do a Genius Hour, go be geniusy, go. It's not going to work, and it's a mistake. But when you have transparency, everybody's talking to one another. As Zach was talking earlier, we go round robin style at the end on Fridays, because when a kid's trying to hide and mail it in, they know BS when they hear it. So the students support one another, but they're also kind of there to be there saying, hey, you said you were going to do these things this week. Where's the proof? So that's learning how to fight kind of split. We also do the play out the scenario game. We'll pitch an idea and we'll say, okay, play out the scenario. If this works, what do you do then? And because a lot of our Genius Hour type projects, we want them to start small and they all build on each other. If phase one works, that means there's a phase two. But if phase one doesn't work, which gets me to that last point on the slide, then know when to quit. Last thing I'll wrap up with, because we're about out of time. I had a student 3 years ago. She knew exactly what she wanted to do. She had a brother that had pretty severe Down syndrome, and she wanted to start a baseball league for Down syndrome athletes. Unfortunately, she was 4 months into it, and she had no idea how much legal work there was to get basically a non-for-profit started. She had two parents that were lawyers, and she still didn't know. She didn't know that you had to look for, a sponsorship. You had to get a board of directors. You had to apply for 501(c) status. You had to do X. You had to was it, and she was several months into it, and she came into my office, and she was never get done with this year, and it was hard for her to understand. But she had to learn. She had to know when to quit. And this is actually what started the feasibility study. Had she just spent a week asking the right questions, then she would have known this was going to take more than the 6 months of school. Had she been able to gather data, talk to other people who had started Miracle Leagues, she would have known that as just one student, there's no way that she could have gotten this off the ground. So all these, this is like fourth year of trying to offer this type of class. Those were some of the biggest lessons of all. And I think chief among them is know when to quit. I know you spend a lot, and by the way, I don't fail them for it not working. The lessons that this student learned in all this process was worth all the time, but it was hard for her to hang it up and say, I give, and it's not going to work. We have like 3 minutes left. Any other questions you guys have?
They want to be brought up on stage, you can raise your hand. I will have you and bring you up. I don't know if Tom, if you've got your mic working or not. We can try to bring you back up again. I can try you one more time. Let's see.
Okay, I'm talking now. Can anybody hear me?
We got you this time.
Okay, Don, I know this is going to sound like a ridiculously dumb question, but when talking about the Genius Hours to educators around the country, it completely turns them off, and I don't know how to even answer this. Is the term Genius Hour? They can't get beyond that. How do you deal with that? What do you say to people who wouldn't even consider something because of what it's called?
First of all, they're kind of, I'll answer this in two parts. Number one, believe it or not, I'm not the biggest fan of the term myself because genius is a tricky term. So in some ways, I understand. But that's why some people call it 20% time. Heck, I don't even call it genius hour. I have an innovation class. Personally, I think that it's one of the reasons why I wrote my book. I don't think innovation needs to be relegated to 20 minutes on a Friday. I think that's wrong. I think that there's a lot you can do to build your culture of innovation, so you don't need to call it a genius hour. But baby steps are baby steps. What would I say to them? Call it whatever you want. I mean, essentially, there is no secret sauce. The magic of a genius hour time is exactly what Daniel Pink talked about: freedom, mastery, and autonomy. And the only thing I can say to them is look at other trying it and are so in love with it. Why are they in love with it? And that's why I'm calling on all educators: be as transparent as you can. Put all of your student stuff on Twitter, on YouTube, on any place. And even if it is an elementary school class, it doesn't matter. You can put their stuff on there. And then that's when you start transforming lives. When students are working this passionately and showcasing their work, I have yet to come across an educator that looks at my student stuff and then says, well, that's a mistake. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted Zach on. That kid is doing it. He is now connecting with people that I didn't dream of. And it's all because we provide some freedom, we provide resources, and we provide a lot of encouragement. So to the naysayers, come up with your own. You know, we have a thing called the selfie in our class. We have a little sign out. The selfie is not a little, photo sharing thing. It is a student enriched learning, innovative environment. So call it a selfie. I don't care what the heck you call it. Just do something. Give them a block of time where you allow them to be creative, where you allow them to work on things they're truly passionate about, and the world will change. I'm telling you, I'm so charged up about what my students are doing that I just scream from the freaking mountaintops, look at what they're doing, because they're doing things that are not just good for school, they're meaningful. They're impacting people. They're changing lives, for God's sake. And um, and lastly, this is my last point. Sometimes you just have to, as teachers, and I get, you may have an administration that's not willing or so on and so forth. Hey, sometimes you just need to ask for an apology and not permission. And I'm not to get out to get anybody fired, but sometimes you just have to take these risks and demonstrate to your kids, your students, that these risks are worth it for you, and you'll go to bat for them.
Well, often people's stated objections are not their real objections. I think people who say that sometimes have a fear, rather than objecting to the name of something, have a fear of giving up control of the class, or turning control of education over to students. That's probably
Yeah,
more to what their objection is. It's a
yeah.
big risk
Or on the opposite.
for teachers.
Yeah, and on the opposite end of that, I've also seen some teachers that want to give up everything so they can check their Facebook status. Go do Genius Hour
Yeah,
while I go check my Facebook. That's also dangerous too.
yeah.
But for those people that are about it, man, I'm telling you, there's something fun in life when you give up control and allow things to happen. And that's kind of my favorite part in the book, is when my dad told me, I was not in education and I went into education, and my dad was a lifetime educator, and he's the one who told me, hey son, I don't care if you teach 20 years. Just please promise me you won't teach 1 year 20 times. Don't repeat things over
Hmm.
again. Make it different. Switch things up. And that has inspired me, and it still does. So this is the best thing I've seen come through, to have really student engaged students showcasing what is right. I think that we're all should be public relations agents, because every time the media is saying that public education isn't good, oh, get on my Twitter account. Look at what my students are doing. I dare you to say student education. Students today are so awesome. I can't stand it, because they're producing things that we never dreamed of, that I never dreamed of. So it's our time to shine for that reason.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we have gone just a little bit over, but I know that probably Steve will wrap up, but from the bottom of my heart, by all means, let me know. I highly recommend that you take a look at our YouTube page. Again, that's if you type in Noblesville Innovation, you will get us, and we do weekly updates. My students' blog, if you want to check that out, I'll share anything with you. And for that matter, if you ever want me to meet or talk to your students, I always set aside time. I work for a great school corporation where they give me time to work with other school teachers and places that are outside our own school walls. So anything I can do to help you, it is my honor to do that. So with that, Steve, I don't know if you want to wrap it up or not. I guess we'll bid adieu. Is that good? Here he comes.
That was awesome. Yeah. So thank you. So thank you, Don, and thank you to everybody for joining us for this EdChat Interactive today. I know all we really did was got a ton of great information, but really essentially just scratched the surface. And so I'm excited that Don will be back on the 21st of January at 8 o'clock Eastern to continue this conversation. And I hope we can have more. It would be great to hear from more kids and hear more of the great things that the kids are doing. Zach has done, to create the app he's created, and it's amazing to hear what kids are doing when given the opportunity. So we hope that you can join us. You can head over to edchatinteractive.org and click on upcoming events, and you can sign up for Don's next session again on the 21st. And we also have a session coming up on the 15th of January with Andy Marcinic, who's going to be talking about how not to lose your mind when you are starting a one-to-one program. He was actually in charge of one of the first one-to-one iPad implementations in the country in Massachusetts, and so we'll hear from him and his new book. So we hope that you can. Thanks on behalf of myself and Mitch and Tom for EdChat Interactive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.